I gave my daughter a house as a wedding gift, thinking her marriage would be something elegant, joyful, everything a mother could wish for. But before the ceremony even took place, that so-called son-in-law showed up with his whole family, parents, brother, sister-in-law, all moving in as if they owned the place. The first thing they said was, "We'll take the master bedroom. She can handle all the chores." I thought this was supposed to be a marriage. It turns out they saw my daughter as nothing more than a living maid. But here's what they didn't see coming: they got too proud too soon and realized too late. My daughter is no one's stepping stone. In the next instant, I made sure each and every one of them shut their mouths. My daughter's fiancé, Curtis Miller, seemed like a good guy, polite, attentive to Natalie, the kind of boyfriend any parent would approve of, albeit cautiously. But his family? That was a whole different story. They had no house, no car, and certainly no financial contribution to the wedding. His parents lived in some remote town, working as farm laborers, while his brother and sister-in-law barely survived on odd jobs in the city. Thomas and I had our doubts about this relationship from the beginning, but Natalie was in love, deeply, stubbornly, hopelessly in love. She begged, persuaded, and insisted until we finally gave in. Wanting to ensure she wouldn't have problems after getting married, we gave her a beautiful home in the suburbs of Boston, a detached house, fully renovated down to the last detail. Thomas oversaw everything personally, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in custom designs, carefully selected finishes, and the best contractor's money could buy. On the day the renovations were complete, he was so excited he practically dragged me over to see the finished result. But before we even went inside, an unmistakably shrill voice rang throughout the house. "Oh my God, is this neighborhood a prison? All these houses have locked doors. How am I going to visit the neighbors if no one leaves their doors open? Curtis, go tell them to be more neighborly and stop shutting everyone out. And that front door, what the hell is that? It looks like a damn fortress, bars so tight it's like guarding a bank. What happens when our relatives come to visit? Are they supposed to wait outside like beggars? Curtis, hire some workers and tear down that ridiculous thing." I didn't even need to see her to know it was Curtis's mother, Mrs. Miller. A slow, simmering anger began to grow in my chest. Curtis hadn't contributed a thing to any of this, not a house, not a car, not even an engagement ring. Natalie had quietly bought one herself so we wouldn't worry, pretending it was from him. Sure, we found out later, but in the end, Thomas and I decided to let it go. We believed, at least, that they loved each other. What infuriated me most was his parents' reaction when they found out. Instead of gratitude or shame, they scoffed, calling Natalie wasteful. An engagement ring was just a formality, they argued. Why throw money away on something so unnecessary? Now, standing on the threshold of this house, our house, hearing this woman complain as if she were inspecting some rundown motel, I felt my patience wearing thin. Natalie, always conciliatory, tried to stay calm. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, there's a wonderful community center nearby if you're looking for company. There are game nights, social events, plenty of opportunities to meet people." Mrs. Miller wrinkled her nose. "Card games? Please. You think we've never played cards before?" Then, as if we were invisible, Curtis's parents wandered off to explore, poking their heads into rooms, inspecting the furniture, acting as though they already owned the place. Not a single word of greeting, not a single glance in our direction. Natalie stood there, caught between courtesy and disbelief. Even Thomas, usually the most even-tempered, looked utterly bewildered. Seeing my expression darken, Curtis scurried over and whispered, "Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson, I know my parents can be spirited. They just talk loudly, that's all. But please, I promise you, they really do care about Natalie." Before I could respond, loud, booming laughter came from the master bedroom. "Now this is a gorgeous room," said Mr. Miller. For a fraction of a second, I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they finally appreciated what we'd done for Natalie. Then I walked in, and my breath caught in my throat. There was Mrs. Miller, sprawled out on the brand new bed as if it were hers, legs crossed, shoes still on. The fresh, starched sheets were already stained with dirt from her worn-out soles. Next to her, Mr. Miller was calmly lighting a cigarette inside my daughter's brand new home. Before I could say a word, he pressed the burning tip against the solid wooden nightstand, snuffing it out as if it were an old ashtray. A dark, charred mark immediately marred the polished surface. Thomas's jaw tightened so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. Natalie, visibly embarrassed, elbowed Curtis, silently pleading for him to step in. But he simply lowered his head, shoulders slumped, looking like a scolded child, not a word, no protest at all. Then, as if their audacity wasn't already at its peak, Mr. Miller stretched out his arms and let out a contented sigh. "This room is perfect. Plenty of natural light, a spectacular view. We'll take it." I nearly swore out loud. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe my ears were playing tricks on me. But no, they had waltzed into my daughter's house, looked around, and decided on the master bedroom for themselves. Thomas, Natalie, and I stood frozen, too shocked to speak. This wasn't some misunderstanding, this was an invasion. Mr. Miller left the master bedroom without so much as acknowledging us and headed to one of the smaller rooms. He scanned the space, then nodded in apparent satisfaction. "This one's perfect, ideal for our grandson." He turned to Curtis without hesitation. Call your brother and tell him to cancel the lease. He and Yanni should move here with Luca right away. Then, as if it were already settled, he continued, we'll put the house in Travis's name so Luca has a stable home when he starts school here. As for you and Natalie, you can come back once you have kids. Until then, there's no rush. I felt my patience snap. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, Thomas grabbed my wrist, giving a slight shake of his head. He wanted to see if our daughter could handle this herself because if she couldn't set boundaries now, what future could she have with this family? I exhaled harshly and turned my gaze to Curtis. The boy who had always seemed polite, articulate, and respectful in our presence stood there, head down, back hunched, silent, a puppet with cut strings. Natalie, however, had reached her limit. Her voice turned icy. This house was a gift from my parents. It's not a boarding house for your whole family. Don't you think you're overstepping? The atmosphere grew taut. Mr. Miller's face darkened. A puff of smoke shot aggressively from his nose as his voice sharpened. Your house? He asked, waving his hand dismissively. You really think this place is yours? It's my son's house, which means it's ours. And you've got the nerve to talk back to your future father-in-law before you're even married? What? You think you'll throw us out once you have a ring on your finger? He let his gaze roam over the room, then scoffed. Travis is still wasting money on rent every month. This house is huge. It's a shame to waste so much space. Why shouldn't they move in? Mrs. Miller immediately chimed in, her tone growing shriller by the second. I understand, truly, it's your wedding house, but honestly, isn't it a little ridiculous? Just two people living in a mansion? She pointed at the smaller room. What's the problem if Lucas stays here? You don't even have kids yet. Why leave a perfect room empty? Then, as if this were some grand gesture of generosity, she added, we're not trying to take advantage of you, honey. We just don't want them struggling on their own. We came here to help, to support you. You should be grateful. Then, as if sensing how icy our expressions had become, she turned her attention to Natalie with a smile. Besides, you're about to be my daughter-in-law. It's only fair you take care of us, cook, clean. You're responsible for keeping us comfortable. Don't even think about slacking off just because you're the bride. My fingers closed into fists. Natalie's hands trembled at her sides, her breathing ragged. Still, Mrs. Miller hadn't finished. Honestly, looking at you, you're clearly not very good at housework. Why not spare yourself the trouble and ask your father to hire a maid to take care of us? Natalie's whole body went rigid. Tears filled her eyes, but instead of falling, they burned bright and furious. Finally, she snapped. If you want a house in the city, if you want someone to take care of you, pay for it yourselves. Stop expecting my parents to give you everything. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Mrs. Miller's face twisted in anger. Curtis, you hear this? This is the woman you're about to marry. She talks like we're beggars. Since when is her family's money more important than ours? A marriage is about sharing everything. Don't you get it? Curtis's face went pale. He raised his voice, alarmed. Natalie, you can't say those things. Apologize to my parents. Natalie's glare shifted to him. Her voice was cold as steel. Curtis, if you truly believe that, then take your parents and get out of my house. My parents bought me this house. No, you didn't. They did. Curtis reached out and grabbed her wrist. Natalie, come on. You always throw these tantrums, and I always let it go, but can't you at least show some respect to my parents? Natalie jerked her arm away as if his touch burned her. Mrs. Miller let out a bitter laugh. You should be grateful you're marrying a man like Curtis. You think you're too good for us? Look at you, selfish, spoiled, downright disrespectful. Frankly, I don't think you're good enough for him at all. She turned to Curtis, eyes blazing. See, she's looking down on us now, just like all these city folks. Natalie stared right back, her voice firm. We're not even married yet, and you're already trying to claim what's not yours. That's not family. That's greed. Curtis wiped his forehead, face tense. Natalie, that was way out of line. You need to apologize. Mr. Miller took a slow step forward, exhaling smoke in our direction. His gaze landed on Thomas and me, his voice derisive. Thomas, I've got to ask, how exactly did you raise your daughter? Because she's got a serious discipline problem here. No respect, no humility, always, my house, my house. It's exhausting to listen to. He took another drag of the cigarette and blew it out slowly. You're not looking down on us country folk, are you? He said, narrowing his eyes. You know, Curtis didn't turn out this way on his own. He had to be disciplined as a kid, tough love, real upbringing. That's why he's polite, hardworking, humble. That's why he's got a future in the city. He smiled a hard, humorless smile. When your daughter marries into our family, she'll learn her place, too. Curtis will teach her how to behave. He'll make sure of it. Curtis stood frozen next to him, silent. Then he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. But I saw it. We all saw it. And in that moment, something changed in Natalie's eyes. Thomas looked at the Millers, completely stunned. In all his years, he'd never met a family so brazen, so shameless. I couldn't hold back anymore. Rage rose in my chest, and I let it explode. How we raise our daughter is none of your concern. And you have the nerve to lecture us? I stepped forward, my voice resolute. You couldn't contribute a single cent to the wedding, no house, no car, absolutely nothing toward this marriage. And now you have the gall to act like this house is yours? I turned to Curtis, furious. Your son, what exactly does he bring besides obedience? He relies on us for everything. So tell me, what gives him the right to demand anything? The Millers stood there, momentarily stunned, as though no one had ever dared put them in their place before. After a moment, Mr. Miller lost his composure. Enough. Are you done talking? So what if we don't have money? Your daughter wasn't exactly hard to get, was she? She practically threw herself at Curtis. His tone turned mocking, his smile sharp and mean. You think we don't know why she's past her prime? If she were really worth something, you wouldn't have to bribe a man to marry her with a house and gifts. Let's be honest, you knew she didn't have better options. Natalie's entire body went rigid, her hands clenched into fists, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. I knew what she was thinking. For years, she'd worried about Curtis's insecurities. She never flaunted her family's wealth. She never bought herself luxury items around him. Every dinner, every movie date, she'd foot the bill, pretending it was nothing. Yet here they were, twisting her kindness into desperation. Natalie took a shaky, deep breath. Then her voice rang out in the hushed room. Mom, Dad, I'm not marrying him. Thomas and I turned to her. Her gaze was clear, her voice firm. I mean it. She looked at Curtis, then at us. You were right. We come from completely different worlds, and this was never going to work. She knew this wasn't an impulse decision. She'd seen the truth, the real truth, not the illusion of love she'd clung to. We'd sensed it, too, how their relationship had been unraveling for months. But today, this moment was the last straw. Mrs. Miller was not about to give up. She let out a cold laugh. Oh, please, don't play the victim. Even if you cancel the wedding, my son will never take you back. Natalie didn't even look at her. She turned to Curtis, her voice rough as ice. Take your parents and leave. It's over. Curtis panicked, grabbing her wrist. Nat, come on. Don't do this. Don't be so stubborn. She yanked her arm back like his touch was fire. Don't touch me. Mr. Miller let out a derisive laugh. Look at you, Curtis, pathetic. She's not even your wife yet, and you can't control her. If you let this go, she'll walk all over you the rest of your life. His voice turned scornful. Are you even a man? That was the final straw. I was speechless. I picked up a glass from the table and slammed it to the floor. The crash echoed through the house, leaving an unsettling, resonant silence in its wake. Then Thomas moved with a roar of pure fury. He lunged forward and landed a solid punch across Mr. Miller's face. The impact sent Mr. Miller reeling backward, crashing against the wall before collapsing to the floor, choking on his own breath. A dark red bruise already covered his cheek. Mrs. Miller shrieked. Are you crazy? That's assault. Thomas stood over him, his voice low and menacing. Say one more word, and you won't walk out of this house. Curtis froze, face pale as a ghost. He didn't dare move. I stepped forward, and for the first time, Curtis looked scared. His voice trembled. I only said that because they were disrespecting my parents. If he apologizes, maybe we can forget all this. Before he could finish, Thomas's palm struck Curtis across the face so hard he staggered back onto the floor. A brilliant red handprint bloomed on his cheek. He clutched it, stunned, eyes wide with disbelief. Bastard. Thomas growled. That was for Natalie, for every word you let them say about her. Curtis scrambled back, breathing in ragged gasps, looking as trapped as a cornered rat. Mr. Miller, still dazed, started to stand. When Thomas turned on him, Mr. Miller paled. If you lay a hand on me again, I'm calling the police. You'll go to jail for this. Thomas grabbed him by the collar and yanked him up so his feet left the ground. Shut up. Mr. Miller struggled, legs kicking wildly, shoes falling off. Let go of me, you psycho. Thomas leaned in, voice sharp. Now I see you for what you really are. Even if Natalie wanted to marry someone from your family, I'd never allow it. Mr. Miller was trembling, his bravado shattered. Thomas tightened his grip. My daughter is smart, beautiful, capable. She doesn't need your son. In fact, she's way too good for him. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. You couldn't pay for a wedding. You couldn't buy them a house. The minute you stepped in here, you disrespected us, trailing dirt on our floors, smoking in our rooms, acting like we owe you something. So, let me make this clear. He shoved Mr. Miller back, sending him to the floor like a discarded rag. We're not giving you a thing. Now, get out of my house. Mr. Miller, trembling, nodded, furious and afraid. Thomas flung his shoe at him. Pick it up and get out. Mr. Miller jumped up, nearly tripping over himself as he ran to the door. I crossed my arms, smirking. Look at that. He's running away and leaving his wife and son behind. Mrs. Miller, still in shock, suddenly grabbed Curtis's arm and dragged him toward the exit. At the door, she couldn't resist a final cheap shot. You'll regret this. Curtis could have any woman he wants. Girls would line up for him. Your daughter will end up alone. I took a step forward, and she bolted. As they rushed down the steps, one of them must have tripped because suddenly all three of them went tumbling down the front stairs, arms and legs flailing. Loud thumps echoed across the driveway. Thomas sighed, shaking his head as he watched them groan on the pavement. They deserved it. I thought once Natalie ended things with Curtis, she'd finally be rid of that family's nonsense and move on with her life, but I clearly underestimated how far they were willing to go. That night, when Natalie got home from work, she seemed visibly upset. She didn't say a word, just walked in and sat down her purse with a deep sigh. I frowned. What's wrong? Wordlessly, she handed me her phone. He emailed me. Curtis. Natalie had already blocked him everywhere, calls, texts, social media. But somehow, he'd found a way to slip back into her life. Thomas and I leaned in and opened the email. The subject read, Natalie, since we broke up, it's only fair you pay me back what you owe. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Did you borrow money from him? Natalie let out a dry, humorless laugh. Open the attachment. We clicked on the file, and my blood pressure nearly doubled. It was a spreadsheet, a meticulously organized, detailed list of every dollar he'd spent on her throughout their relationship. Tuesday Starbucks, 2 coffees, $11, Valentine's Day flowers, $20, weekend Uber ride, $14, birthday gift card, $200, dinners 12 times, $1,070, delivery, $885. Line after line, perfectly itemized, tracking an entire year's worth of expenses, like some sort of investment he wanted returns on. And at the bottom, in bold, $2,897.36. I'll be generous, it read. Just send me $2,000, and we'll call it even. Thomas and I stared at the screen, speechless. I felt the heat rise to my face. I clenched my fists. This man had no shame. Did he really think we didn't know the truth? On almost all their dates, dinners, movies, trips, Natalie was the one who pulled out her credit card. Curtis had taken her out to dinner once, and it was fast food on his birthday. She'd bought him the latest iPhone for over $1,200. And for her birthday, she only got a $200 gift card. Let's not forget last year when his father had a health issue. I was the one who went to the hospital with a $1,500 gift. Yet now he was charging her. To top it off, the email ended with a thinly veiled threat. If you don't pay, I'll have no choice but to go to your workplace and settle this in person. Settle what, exactly? This wasn't just absurd, it was pathetic. The moment the elevator doors opened, I knew immediately something was off. A crowd had gathered near the lobby, whispering and pointing at the entrance. The air hummed with anticipation, like people watching a spectacle. There, in the middle of it all, were Curtis and his parents. Curtis himself was cowering in a corner, head down, as though trying to disappear. But his parents were yelling like they were leading a street protest. Mrs. Miller's shrill voice echoed through the room. Where's your supervisor? I want to see a manager. We're here because of Natalie. She owes my son money and refuses to pay. The employees standing around exchanged puzzled looks, whispering among themselves. More people trickled in, drawn by the commotion. The moment Natalie and I stepped off the elevator, silence fell over the entire floor. All eyes turned on us. Mrs. Miller, seeing Natalie, immediately pointed her finger and raised her voice another notch. Listen, everyone, this woman, your coworker, dated my son for a whole year. She spent his money, took advantage of his generosity, and now that they've broken up, she thinks she can just walk away without paying him back. Tell me, is that fair? The whispers resumed, louder than before. Wait, is that true? I thought she came from a wealthy family. Her father's an executive at the Granite Group, isn't he? Maybe it's all fake. Natalie's face turned red. I felt her shoulders tremble. She'd never been in a situation like this, publicly humiliated, treated like a swindler. She'd always been serene, professional, respected. Now, in one instant, Curtis's family had reduced her to a spectacle. I stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her back, reassuring her. I had this. I straightened my shoulders, folded my arms, and fixed my gaze on Mrs. Miller. The moment I confronted her, her arrogance faltered. They'd already felt Thomas's fury once, they knew what he was capable of. Still, Mrs. Miller stood tall, trying to salvage her performance. We just want what's right. Your daughter owes my son money, and we're here to collect. I arched an eyebrow, my voice cold and sharp. Oh, since we're making a public scene, let's clarify exactly how much she supposedly owes. Mrs. Miller hesitated a fraction of a second, then drew herself up. A lot. A lot of money. How much, exactly? I pressed. She flinched slightly but then squared her shoulders and practically shouted, $2,897.36. The room froze. A moment of dead silence, then a burst of laughter. Wait, what? All this fuss over less than $3,000? And did she just say 36 cents? Who counts like that? The murmurs escalated into outright mockery. Mrs. Miller's expression flickered, but Mr. Miller jumped in, desperate to save face. He reached back and pulled out a giant sign, holding it up like some strange protest banner. Here's a complete breakdown of every expense. My son paid for her coffee, her movie tickets, her dinners. Look at the figures. He started reading off the transactions, voice booming like he was presenting a corporate budget report. But the more he read, the more the crowd reacted. Dude, is he seriously itemizing every coffee? Wait, Valentine's flowers, $20? That's a joke, man. He kept track of every cup of coffee? That's not budgeting, that's psycho behavior. Then Curtis mumbled something under his breath. I was just keeping track for financial planning. It wasn't about being stingy. That only made things worse. Laughter erupted. I knew this was my moment. I stepped forward, my voice loud and clear. All right, since you're demanding payment, let's do this properly. I pulled out my checkbook. The room fell silent. With deliberate slowness, I wrote a $3,000 check, making sure everyone could see the amount. Then, with a casual flick of my wrist, I tossed it toward Curtis. The check floated through the air and landed at his feet. There, every last cent you claim we owe, paid in full. Gasps of amazement rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Miller lunged for the check, snatching it up. For an instant, she looked triumphant. She even smiled. I smiled, too. Now, Curtis, I said, letting each word ring out clearly, while we're settling debts, let's talk about what you owe Natalie. Curtis froze. His face drained of color. He knew exactly what I meant, and the crowd did, too. Mrs. Miller screeched, her voice turning shrill. What money? This is nonsense, lies, slander. I let out a cold laugh. Really? Let's go through the figures, shall we? I locked eyes with her, unflinching. For Curtis's birthday, my daughter bought him a new phone, $1,200. When his father got sick, I personally gave them a $1,500 gift. I have the receipts right here. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. And those are just the verifiable expenses, already over $2,500, not counting all the other day-to-day costs we haven't tallied. I turned toward the crowd, raising my voice just enough for them to hear. Tell me, shouldn't he pay that back? The response was immediate. Of course he should. That's more than what they're asking for. Talk about hypocrisy. A chorus of agreement swelled. The Millers flinched, their faces pale and rigid. Mrs. Miller, clinging to the few shreds of dignity she had left, huffed, You're making this up. Lies, slander. That was when Natalie finally stepped forward, her patience gone. If you won't admit the truth, fine. We can take it somewhere else. Her voice was sharp and unwavering. She turned, her gaze locking on Curtis. How about we go to your office, stand outside your company, and display this for all your coworkers? How would you like that, Curtis? The color drained instantly from his face. His office was only 2 floors above ours, no escape. Mrs. Miller's face twisted with rage. Ungrateful brat. Then she lunged forward, hand raised, aiming straight for Natalie's face. This time, I was ready. The moment she moved, I stepped in, putting myself between them. My voice was low, calm, and firm. You'd better put that hand down. A chilling silence took hold. Mrs. Miller's arm froze in midair, her face locked in shock. I didn't blink, didn't waver. I simply stared at her and then slowly, deliberately shifted my gaze to Curtis. You came here to create a public scene, but all you've done is destroy what little dignity you had left. Curtis stared at the floor, silently defeated. I took a slow breath and turned to the employees watching. Instead of addressing them, I spoke to Natalie. Let's go. We'll take this to his company's management and handle it professionally. No shouting, no threats, just calm, decisive action. Without another word, we turned and walked toward the elevator. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The damage was done. The supervisor arrived quickly, his expression polite but puzzled. Can you tell me what's going on? He asked, looking at us and the growing crowd. I showed him Curtis's email, the one demanding money so aggressively, and summarized the situation calmly. We're not here to argue, I said, voice firm and unyielding. We just want a fair resolution. The supervisor skimmed the email, frowning deeper the more he read. I kept explaining. Then one of his assistants walked over and whispered something in his ear. His eyes shifted to me, and his demeanor changed almost instantly. Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Mrs. Dawson from the Granite Group? I nodded, offering a serene smile. That's me. Immediately, his posture straightened, his tone becoming formally polite, almost apologetic. I'm terribly sorry the situation has escalated so far. Our company takes professionalism and ethics very seriously. I'll speak with Curtis in private to address this matter. Then he turned to Curtis, his tone turning stern. Curtis, I'm really disappointed. Keeping detailed records of personal expenses, demanding reimbursement after a breakup, and causing a public disturbance in front of another company's offices? Completely inappropriate. Curtis's face turned white. He opened his mouth, groping for an excuse. No, I didn't think it would turn into all this. The supervisor cut him off. Not only have you embarrassed yourself, but you've also damaged this company's image. I'll be reporting this to HR. Curtis visibly shrank, head bowing lower, hands twisting as he nodded weakly. His arrogance, his sense of entitlement, was gone. I nodded, thanking the supervisor politely. That settles it. I turned to Natalie, ready to leave, but just as we stepped away, Mrs. Miller's shrill voice tore through the air. Wait, this isn't over. I paused, then turned slowly, my gaze impassive. I didn't need to say a thing because, at that moment, everyone knew exactly who had already won. A few weeks went by, and life finally seemed to go back to normal. Natalie returned to her job, had coffee with friends, and did yoga on weekends. She looked better, lighter, no longer burdened by the stress of the past. Thomas and I had an unspoken agreement not to mention Curtis or anything that happened. We didn't want to risk reopening wounds that were still healing. She was doing well, at least around us. She made sure everything seemed in order until that night. She walked in with takeout in her hands, but something was off in her expression. I glanced at her as I set the table. Work okay? I asked casually. She hesitated, then silently handed me her phone. He reached out again. The screen showed a text from an unknown number, but the words were painfully familiar. Natalie, I've been thinking a lot lately. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have listened to my parents, and I never should have taken out my frustration on you. I have nothing left now, but I want to start over. Will you give me another chance? I exhaled slowly and looked at her. This is the third time. Her voice was low. I haven't responded. I nodded. Good. Silence is the clearest answer. She sighed. I just don't get it. Does he really feel sorry, or does he just hate losing? Probably both, I said calmly. But that's not your problem anymore. His growth isn't your responsibility. She looked out the window, saying nothing. I knew her heart wasn't wavering. It wasn't love that was difficult, it was habit, the emotional residue of investing so much in someone only to realize they were never worth it. Just a few days later, things took a turn. That night, she walked in with a different look, no sadness, but something colder, sharper. She set her phone on the counter. Mom, look at this. I picked it up, and the moment my eyes landed on the screen, my stomach flipped. A post on social media, an anonymous message attached, with a blurry photo and video clips carefully edited to paint a false narrative. The title was nothing short of cruel, a true gold digger. She extorted her ex after the breakup, showing off her rich family. Guess she's not so untouchable now. A slow, simmering rage built inside me. We didn't need to guess who made it. She shook her head. I can't trace the account, but look at the content. These photos, these videos, it's all Curtis. He edited himself out. He's using an anonymous account, but we both know. I clenched my jaw. So now he's resorting to this. She let out a long, slow sigh, fatigue weighing on her. I just wanted to move on. Why won't he let me? I put my hand over hers, giving it a firm squeeze. Why? Because he's not obsessed with you. He's obsessed with his own ego. He can't move forward, so all he knows how to do is drag people backward. That same night, I contacted an old college friend, now an attorney at a well-known firm. The following morning, we officially issued a legal notice demanding the removal of the defamatory anonymous post, as well as a request to preserve the author's IP information for possible legal action. We also filed a civil complaint for harassment, ensuring a documented record of Curtis's behavior. For the moment, things seemed to settle, but Curtis still wasn't done. A week later, Natalie received a package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from Curtis. The tone dripped with regret, guilt, and nostalgia. He wrote about their first date, her smile, how she'd stayed up nights caring for his ailing father, every line carefully crafted to tug at her heartstrings. But then, in the last sentences, his true intent showed. I can't accept that you're gone for good. You know I have nothing left. You were my only light. If you don't come back, I don't know what I'll do. This wasn't an apology, it was emotional blackmail. My expression darkened as I read those final words. Without hesitation, I called our lawyer and started the process of filing a restraining order. That afternoon, Natalie and I went to the courthouse together. She sat on a bench, clutching the letter so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mom, she said in a low, tense voice, I know I'm handling things well, but why is it still so exhausting? I placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not tired. You're healing, and that takes time, but you're doing everything right. She exhaled slowly, then looked me in the eye. For the first time, there was no hesitation there. I won't let him hurt me again. I smiled. That's my girl. A few weeks later, the court officially granted a temporary restraining order, legally prohibiting Curtis from contacting or approaching Natalie in any way. We also provided all our evidence to Granite Group's legal team, ensuring it was on record should any further problems arise. This time, we didn't expect him to apologize. We didn't give him a single chance to worm back into our lives. Natalie was finally free. She was no longer the girl who stayed silent out of concern for someone else's feelings, who gave in, apologized, or tried to fix someone who wouldn't change. She'd fully stepped into her own life and, without realizing it, had begun crossing the self-imposed boundaries that once held her back. She threw herself into her job, refusing to let emotions derail her focus. Instead of hesitating, she took on multiple projects at once, proving she could thrive under pressure. She knew what she wanted and, more importantly, what she no longer needed. Then came the regional business conference. Granite Group selected her to represent the firm at a major industry networking event. She took the stage with authority, delivering her presentation with confidence and precision. The audience, executives, investors, and industry leaders, listened, nodding in approval. By the end, several corporate representatives from across the states approached her, eager to exchange business cards and explore potential partnerships. That event subtly but irreversibly shifted the course of her career and, with it, her life. At an informal networking lunch after the conference, Natalie met Ethan Parker. Ethan was one of the co-founders of East Bay Capital, an MIT graduate and member of a well-known family of entrepreneurs from San Francisco. But unlike the arrogance often associated with privilege, he was thoughtful, articulate, and level-headed. Their conversation was brief, no pointless small talk or obvious attempts to exchange contact info, just a natural, spontaneous discussion before they went on with their day. Still, a week later, Natalie received a handwritten note from him. It wasn't a grand statement or an over-the-top invitation. It was a sincere letter expressing appreciation for her strong presentation and offering some valuable insights into her business model. Along with it, he included a book on leadership and strategy, something he thought she might find interesting. She was surprised, even impressed. I looked at the letter and smirked. Well, at least this one didn't send you an invoice. After her recent breakup, Natalie let out a small laugh but didn't reply. Even so, there was something different in her expression, a quiet contentment that hadn't been there before. There was no sudden romance or rushed steps. Over time, they communicated more frequently, but never in a forced way. They exchanged industry knowledge, attended small business forums, and occasionally grabbed coffee to discuss market trends. Until one evening, Ethan was driving her home when he suddenly stopped the car. Turning to her, he said, "I don't know how you feel about me." His voice was steady and sincere. "But I want you to know I like you, not just for your work or because you're brilliant or independent, but because when I'm with you, it feels like life is something worth living fully." Natalie froze for a moment. She hadn't expected this moment, certainly not so soon nor so directly. She sat silently, choosing her words carefully. Then she finally nodded. "I don't know what the future holds," she admitted quietly. "But I'd like to find out." For the first time in her life, she entered a relationship without fear, without pretenses, without hesitation. To our surprise, Ethan soon introduced her to his parents. Mr. and Mrs. Parker were warm, intelligent, and welcoming. They never pried into personal matters or cast judgment. Instead, they treated Natalie with the same respect they would any capable adult. At dinner, Mrs. Parker personally prepared a small dessert, smiling kindly. "This is the first time Ethan's ever invited someone home. I had to make sure it was special." Later that night, Ethan's father pulled Thomas aside and said quietly, "She's extraordinary, smart, composed, knows exactly what she wants. We're so glad Ethan met someone like her." There were no entitlements, no demands, no pressure to conform, just a family that valued genuine connection and mutual respect. They were everything Curtis's family was not. For the first time, we could all see Natalie finally in a place where she felt safe, where she was cherished. But good things rarely go unnoticed. One afternoon, a photo appeared online, a candid shot of Natalie and Ethan at a business event, the Parker surname prominent. It didn't take long for the image to spread through industry circles, and soon the news reached Curtis. That night, Natalie left her office and found Curtis waiting near the entrance, face pale, expression contorted. "So, this is it," he said, stepping closer, voice low and resentful. "You left me and ran straight into another man's arms." Natalie didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eye. "Curtis, leave. You have no right to question me." His nostrils flared. "You planned this the whole time, didn't you? You were already with him while you were still with me." Her voice hardened. "You need to stop. I have a restraining order against you. If you follow me, I'll call the police right now." Curtis's face twisted, hands clenched at his sides. He was about to lash out again, but another presence stepped forward. From the parking lot, Ethan approached, his posture calm, expression unreadable, yet his mere presence changed the atmosphere. He moved beside Natalie, voice steady but firm. "I don't know who you are," Ethan said. "But if you step any closer to her, I'll call the police myself." Curtis blinked in surprise. He hadn't realized Ethan was there, and he certainly hadn't expected this confrontation. "So, you're the new boyfriend?" His voice was taunting, but there was a crack in his bravado. You think you're better than me? Ethan didn't take the bait. It doesn't matter who I am, he said quietly. What matters is that you can't hurt her anymore. There was no shouting, no dramatic showdown, but the weight of those words crushed Curtis more than any brawl could have. For an instant, he stood there, glaring at them, Natalie standing tall, unaffected by his anger, Ethan beside her, solid and unwavering. Something broke inside him. He finally understood. The woman he had once criticized, belittled, and controlled was now in a different world, bathed in a light he could never reach. He no longer had any right to be by her side. As they walked away, Curtis remained where he was, face contorted, caught in a storm of rage, regret, and finality. But the world had moved on without him, and Natalie never looked back. After dinner, Natalie and I strolled along the narrow path with slow, measured steps. Gravel crunched softly under our feet, and behind us, the trees swayed in the evening breeze, their shadows rippling on the ground. This was a place we used to visit often when she was little. She loved hopping across the smooth stones by the lake, and my heart would lurch every time she wobbled at the water's edge. I'd reach out, grabbing the sleeve of her jacket, trying to keep her from falling. Now her steps were steady and measured, her gaze clear and determined. Remember how I used to run straight to the water to collect stones? She asked suddenly. I smiled. Sure. You always said each one was unique, that we had to take them all home and wash them properly. She let out a soft laugh. Back then, I thought every small bit of the world was worth keeping. And now? I asked. She paused thoughtfully. Now I know some things are meant to stay in your heart, not in your life. I turned to look at her. She wasn't the little girl who panicked when things went wrong anymore. Mom, she went on, voice quieter, what do you think people chase their whole lives? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the water, the sunlight reflecting in soft, shifting ripples. I think it's different for everyone, I said at last. But for me, it's peace. She raised an eyebrow. Not happiness? I shook my head. Happiness is complicated. Sometimes it's just what other people expect of you. Sometimes it's just a fleeting moment. But peace, that's something you build. It isn't given, and it's not something that appears overnight. She was silent for a long moment, absorbing my words. Then she spoke, her voice as gentle as the evening air. I used to think I needed to be loved to make my life feel meaningful. But now I think learning to love myself is the most important thing, and that's enough. I nodded. It's more than enough. She smiled at me. You've always known that, haven't you? I didn't answer. I just held her gaze. In that moment, I knew she didn't need my protection anymore. She'd learned how to stand in the wind, listen to the water, hear the voices of the world, and decide for herself which ones mattered. We kept walking side by side along the shore of the lake. In the distance, some ducks drifted lazily, their movements sending out gentle ripples, one after another. Suddenly, I understood. We'd walked this path countless times before, the difference being that back then, she always looked to me to find her way. Now she could walk it on her own, but every now and then, she still chose to take her mother's hand, and that was enough. Natalie's perspective. I'm Natalie. Once, I truly believed love could conquer all. When I met Curtis, he was quiet, reserved. He carried himself with a seriousness that made him seem more mature than the guys around him. I mistook that restraint for depth. I mistook his frugality for a practical, realistic outlook on life. Even when my friends gently warned me he was stingy, I dismissed it as harsh judgment. The first time he took me to dinner, it was a fast food place. He ordered the cheapest item on the menu and told me, don't order too much. It's a waste. I smiled, said it was fine, and convinced myself he was just a man who valued practicality. He never gave gifts. On Valentine's Day, he sent me $520 on Venmo, joking, it's the thought that counts. And I, God help me, felt moved. I thought it was a charming, minimalist, grown-up kind of romance. It took me forever to realize his supposed practicality was nothing but disguised greed. I never tallied the gifts. For his birthday, I got him a new iPhone. When mine came, he gave me a $200 gift card, telling me to buy myself something nice. Then, stone-faced, he added, couples shouldn't measure love with money, and I, like a fool, nodded in agreement. He had no car, so I drove. He had no house, so I said it didn't matter. He told me he couldn't afford a ring yet, so I secretly picked one out. I asked my best friend to buy it so I could surprise him on our wedding day. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. And that was just the beginning. The first time I visited his house, his mother barely glanced at me before asking coldly, do you cook? Before I could answer, she added, city girls don't belong in kitchens, but let me tell you, that won't fly in our family. I laughed, thinking she was joking. I do know how to cook, and I'd love to learn more. She didn't smile, just snorted as though something was confirmed. I thought if I was kind and genuine enough, she'd eventually accept me. I didn't realize that was only the start of her endless tests and criticisms. She mocked my clothes, saying I dressed too showily. She mocked my career, saying an overly ambitious woman was too hard to control. She mocked my personality, saying I wasn't sweet enough to be a good wife. Curtis never defended me. All he said was, "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally." Back then, I thought he was keeping the peace. Now I know he was just a coward. His father was even more blunt. "You won't have time for a job once you start having kids. There's no need to waste energy thinking about a career." They believed I shouldn't have personal ambitions, that I didn't need my own space, that I shouldn't even have my own opinions. And me, God help me, I told myself to endure. I thought things would change after we were married. But the moment that woke me up for good was the house. Curtis said he couldn't afford to buy one, so I offered that my parents give me a house as part of my dowry. He didn't hesitate. He smiled and rushed off to tell his parents, and that's when they showed their true colors. His mother declared right away, "We'll take the master bedroom. The second bedroom is for Luca, our grandson, and Travis and his family will move in, too." I tried to be reasonable. I tried to talk it over. She laughed in my face. "Your mother bought you a big house. Lucky you. But that doesn't mean you have any say in it." Curtis stood there in silence. Later, when I confronted him, he pulled me aside and whispered, "She's just talking. Don't take it so seriously." That was when I finally saw I was never going to be his daughter-in-law. I was a resource, a house, a wallet, a convenient stranger who could provide but never be respected. The most absurd part? After we broke up, Curtis spread rumors at work, calling me cold, entitled, and materialistic. Then he had the nerve to send me an itemized invoice listing every coffee, every meal, every trip he paid for, demanding $3,000. I laughed, I really did. The same girl who bought her own engagement ring was now being called a gold digger. I transferred the full amount, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to close that door forever. After that, his life fell apart. He lost his job. His family's reputation was ruined. Every resume he sent out was met with silence. People said he looked exhausted, miserable, lost. I couldn't tell you, I stopped caring by then. Sometimes I think about the girl I used to be, the one who silenced herself for love, who sacrificed her boundaries, who kept telling herself to endure a little more. Yes, it hurts to remember her. But more than anything, I feel free because now I understand. A real relationship isn't one person constantly compensating for the other's flaws. I was never his savior. I was never his family's financial plan. I walked away and lived better, while he was consumed by his own greed, his own selfishness. That is my quietest, most dignified revenge, no screaming, no scheming, not even hatred. Just living a life he can never touch. This time, I'm not bowing down to anyone. This time, I'm moving forward for me.